Welcome to MamaFuel, the podcast that fuels every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully sparks a few dreams along the way. I'm Ann Ferguson, Chief Nurturer and Mama Mentor at the Centered Mama Project, and your host for this podcast. I'll be sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with beautiful mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. Let's get started. Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel. I am excited to introduce you to today's guest. However, before we get on to that, I am looking for 5 curious mamas who would be interested in having a conversation with me because I have an idea that's been brewing for a while and I think its time has come. And that idea is this. I am a wordsmith in my profession. Outside of the work that I do here at MamaFuel, I have another business where I am a copywriter and editor and worked in communications forever. And I would love to marry both my passion for supporting every mama I can possibly connect with and also my passion for language and words by crafting beautiful portraits of you, the woman who is holding all of the things together. Before I start offering that out into the world, I would love to try this with 5 amazing mamas who would be interested in having a conversation with me and then allowing me to draw your written portrait. If you're interested in us getting to know each other and me possibly writing you a description of what I see and hear and feel both intuitively and through our conversation, then drop me an email at Anne, A-N-N-E, at mamafuel.me. That's A-N-N-E at MAMAFUEL.me. If there is enough demand for these spots, then I might open it up more widely. But for now, I'm going to just try with 5 beautiful mamas. So if one of those is you, get in touch. Let's talk. I'd love to get to know you and be able to reflect back to you using my word wizardry, what it is that I sense, hear, and feel when we meet. Without any further ado, let's talk to another word wizard. Sally Wyatt is my guest, and our conversation today was fantastic. And I'm happy to share it with you. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. This is Ann Ferguson, your host, and I am, as ever, delighted to introduce you to a very special guest this week. The woman that you'll be hearing from in a second is a magic maker, because not too long ago, I realized that someone that I am very avidly following and inspired by was coming very near me in Geneva to Lausanne to give a TEDx talk. And Sally Wyatt is the woman who made it possible at the 11 3/4 hour for me to get a ticket to come and see Anna Whitehouse and her husband, Mama and Mother and Father Paka, present at TEDx Lausanne, and I will be eternally grateful to Sally for that. So let me tell you a little bit about her before we get started with our conversation, but it's just wrapped in such a big hug and so much gratitude from the outset. So Sal spent a previous life working in sports marketing, and she flew all over the world and was involved in massive events and big whiz-bangy things. And then at some point, she was promoted to the biggest job she's ever had, which is being a mom. And she now has 2 beautiful daughters who are little, 1 and 3 at this point at time of recording. And she recently moved to Switzerland with her husband and is navigating rusty French, rustier skiing, cheese snorkeling, apparently. This is something I want to ask about. And trying to figure out Swiss admin, which, good grief, is, complex and complicated. So I'm delighted to welcome you onto MamaFuel, Sally. And welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you. What an intro. I've never been called a magician before, but I'll definitely take that. That can be added to the CV.
Oh, definitely. Well, you were a magician for me that day. It was really one of those situations of not having realized that this TED Talk that Anna was talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks that I was seeing on her Instagram and on her other posts was actually happening here. I just assumed it would be happening in the UK, which is where she and Matt live. And to realize that it was literally half an hour train ride away and I didn't know and I wasn't going was, so it was such a put it out to the universe, and then got a sitter before I knew I had a ticket and organized it all, just believing that it was going to happen. And you are the magician who made it happen. So thank you.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. And yes, we'll talk about Anna more later, I'm sure. But
Yes.
It was just incredible to bring in speakers from all over the world for that event. And yeah, I think there was a little bit of magic for everyone that night. And for me as well.
Excellent. Well, let's take a step back and give everybody some context. Tell us about your life right now.
My life is probably best described as brilliant chaos. You might have got an inkling from that, everyone from the intro that Anne just gave me there. But yeah, I essentially moved to Switzerland with a 6-week-old baby and a 2-year-old who literally hit terrible twos the minute we arrived. Refused to sleep in her cot, refused to do her daytime nap anymore. And the juggle was real. You know, you're massively out of your comfort zone, stabilizes off in the most real way. I feel a really different person, actually, from the girl who arrived almost a year ago. It was Easter weekend last year. So much has happened. It feels like yesterday, but also a lifetime. And I've talked to my blog about how stretchy and how strange time is. But we've had a massive year. I'm sure lots of people who listen to this podcast are expats. I have a little bit of an issue with that word. I don't know why. I think it has certain connotations, but I guess just people who live away from their motherland, live away from what they know. And I guess there's a certain maybe personality type or set of values that go with that. Kind of let's just do it, even if we're absolutely petrified. And I've spent a lot of the last year feeling petrified and still do. But yeah, life has been an absolute adventure in the last year. It's had some real highs, it's had some real lows, it's had lots of vanilla moments. And that's what you realize, I think, when you move abroad, is you can't escape yourself. You're still the same person. And sometimes the worst of you is magnified because you're so far from home without your support network. But I think equally the good stuff is so magnified as well, because it feels so amazing when you conquer a fear, you manage to be understood in French, or you find that nursery for your child halfway through the year thinking this is going to be absolutely impossible, or you actually crack some Swiss admin without being told off for doing it wrong the first time round. So yeah, it's been a year of lessons really, and yeah, a year of some difficulties. I lost my mum last month. She'd been ill for a long time, and you learn an awful lot being away from your motherland, and then starting to learn to mother again without your role model, without the person who did that for you and the person who loves you most in the world, or certainly who loves you like nobody else can. So yeah, I feel like I've jumped around a lot there, but it genuinely is a reflection of how life is for me. It's nuts, but I love it, and I feel like I'm growing and I'm learning all the time, even and especially when I'm terrified.
Tell us about that sense of learning and growing into yourself in the context of motherhood, because you talk about being terrified. And before we started recording, we were talking about, you mentioned how people with depression are often the shiniest and smiliest and most together people. And I had incredibly crippling postnatal depression the first time, and have lived on and off with wild levels of anxiety, which at the moment, knocking on all the wood and thanking all the support that I've received and self-care strategies that I have is not at a high pitch at the moment. But terror is part of the whole mothering thing, isn't it? So tell us about your journey into motherhood, because you were organizing global sports events, you were traveling, you were playing all over the world, and it was work. And then all of a sudden is this shift into a completely different role. And we were talking before we started recording about labels and the boxes that we fit ourselves in, and how they start to fit together or don't. Tell us a little bit about that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I believed that I was a diehard career girl. I worked really hard. I was a bit of a geek at uni, and was always just striving for the next thing, the next promotion, the next big event, the next big brand to work with. And yeah, I got to fly all over the world and call it work. But you know what? It really was hard work. It was an amazing experience, but it took almost every single ounce of me. I just poured myself into that job. And, I quickly realized, as the biological clock was ticking, that, the job I was doing was really incompatible with having a family, or certainly the way I was doing it was incompatible with having a family. And I realized that the way I was living my life every day was not conducive to getting me where I wanted to be in the future, i.e. being a mother. I think you at least have to, be on the same continent as your partner. That usually helps when it comes to pregnant, and just not be so stressed and so anxious all the time. I loved my job, but I probably took it way too seriously as well and gave it way too much of myself. So I actually stepped out of the race before having children. I stepped off the work treadmill, and I'm not sure what Sheryl Sandberg would have to say about that. I did lean out, but I felt like I needed to do it. At the same time, my mum got diagnosed with a very rare neurological disease, and I just felt I needed to spend some time and go back to my roots. And so that's what I did at sort of age 34. I moved back home with my parents for a few months. I got out of London, and I just had a bit of time to recalibrate. And I became a mother in 2016, and it was amazing. And I think it's fair to say I found motherhood pretty natural. I didn't struggle at the beginning. I absolutely loved it. I embraced that first year. I was lucky to escape any form of postnatal depression. I don't believe that's a choice or it's a personality trait. It just happens to people or it doesn't. And I was one of the lucky ones. And I just loved being her mother. It was amazing. But when I tried to go back to work, it was the first time I really failed. She was a year old, and I just assumed, well, it's time to go back. That's what everyone does, isn't it? You put your kid into nursery or childcare, and you go back to work, and you do what you've always done. And I couldn't do it. I just found that I took a job that probably wasn't right. I went left field and took a job in medical marketing, which was a field I really didn't know. But I liked the idea of taking quite a dry subject and making it exciting. And I loved the agency. They were great people. They were very, very supportive. But it was just a huge, big, fat compromise for me. And I just found I went back with no confidence and none of the diehard professional that I'd been before. And it was a real eye-opener for me. I was absolutely floored by it, probably for a couple of months. And then I picked myself up and I decided, okay, maybe I need to retrain a bit here. Maybe I need to spend a bit of time just investing in me, because it's true, however much of a natural mother you are, however much you love it, you do forget yourself for a while. And I just decided it was time to invest a bit back in me. And so I retrained in digital marketing. It's always something that had been on the periphery of my world, but I felt a little bit left behind. I felt like a bit of a dinosaur, and I felt like I needed a way of bringing myself up to speed and a bit more relevant. And I also was at the beginning of discovering a real community of women on Instagram, and just thought, I want to know more about this place. What are the rules of engagement? How do you do it? And so I retrained in digital media, and as part of that course, I was given a client, and it was great because it was really like on the job learning. You were told something and you got the theory, and then you had to apply it straight away. I mean, talk about terrifying for someone who is a perfectionist. That was super hard to feel like I'm no expert in this, and yet I'm doing it on someone's real live business. So again, just chucked out of my comfort zone every day, and it was good for me, and it got me more acclimatized to that sort of being the way that life is going to be now. And I think I'm happier in that space. I'm happier outside of my comfort zone. I'm not completely comfortable there. That's the whole point of a comfort zone. But I kind of accept that life is that way. You can't control everything. Things are going to happen to you, and it is about how you respond. And despite that year of trying to go back to work and failing, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. And yeah, I'm proud of how I dug myself out of it. And then daughter 2 came along and we moved to Switzerland pretty soon after that. So you kind of feel like, oh, I've done it once, I'll be a pro at this. And actually you get a different child, a different personality, a totally different environment. Then you lose your own mother and you realize that this is going to carry on for the rest of your life. You're not necessarily going to know the answers and you're going to have to wing it. And that's what I'm doing most days.
Winging it and outside your comfort zone. But isn't that something that I think is a wisdom that maybe some people can access it younger, but on the eve of 45, it's something that I'm really finding peace with, which is change is the only constant. And it's something that is repeated over and over again because it's true, and yet we fight it. We fight it so much because particularly those of us who are perfectionists, and particularly those of us who are type A personalities, and those of us who are uber career women and men. I mean, it coming into motherhood and realizing that you cannot control what happens to these people. You cannot control their experience so that it's good in all the ways that yours may not have been, or offers all of the opportunities that you wish for them, is a humbling lesson over and over and over again until you either come to be at peace with it or it makes you miserable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I've learned that ultimately I don't want to protect my children from failure. I want to help them celebrate it. I want to help them learn from it. And actually children do that so naturally. It's as adults that we lose that ability to fail forward, and we lose that ability to take failure as something positive. You know, I'm watching my 1-year-old learn to walk and she just falls over all the time and she gets back up again. It's the most obvious example of it. Yeah. But, I also was deciding on childcare when we moved out to Switzerland, and we arrived halfway through the year. So it's hard because all the nurseries are full, and, a nanny wasn't really an option. We're on one salary and it's crazy expensive here. So, I'm looking into the option and thinking, well, it needs to be bilingual because she doesn't speak a word of French, and that will just be so scary. And I spoke to a few mums once I got out here, and they were just saying, well, how old is she? 2? Okay, well, no, just chuck her into French. She'll be fine. She'll be amazing. She'll just pick it up. She's learning language anyway. She won't notice. And that's what I did. And I just realized I was projecting my fears onto her. She learned to ski this week, and she went from being able to barely slide one ski forward to coming down a nursery slope in snowplow without holding on to anyone or anything. Amazing. And that's in an hour. And it's just such a lesson that so much can be achieved in the little time that you have. And you can do things that you maybe think you can't. And kids are an incredible lesson in that. And it's pretty humbling.
Yeah, well, you said something earlier about being outside of your comfort zone, and that you actually like being outside of your comfort zone. In this month's MamaFuel Sisterhood, we're focusing on the mind, and we're looking at. We just had a masterclass earlier this week, and Laura Powner came in to talk to us, and she's one of my earlier podcast interviewees, all around the mind and how we work with it, and particularly around money. And she was saying how when you come out of your comfort zone and you get into that level of discomfort, all the mind wants to do is keep you, quote, safe. You might be miserable, but as long as it's familiar, the mind is happy because you're safe, because this is what I know, therefore it's safe. And so many of us have habits that we know aren't good for us and that we know we would like to shift, and yet the default programming is keep doing it because you've been doing it and we're still here and we're safe. It's so basic. And yet when you spend more and more time outside of your comfort zone, that becomes the new safe, doesn't it? It becomes the new normal in the sense that this is where I choose to spend most of my time. And there is constant evidence that I'm still here. I'm still okay. This is a different kind of safe. Maybe it doesn't feel as cozy and perhaps mindless as the previous safe. But boy, you feel alive, don't you?
Yeah, I so agree. It's life affirming. Terror can be life affirming, fear can be life affirming, death can be life affirming. And I would rather be in that place and feel like I'm living than somewhere comfortable. And that does not mean to say that I don't love a Netflix series as much as anyone else and snuggling up on the sofa and thinking of nothing else. I think you still need those moments of safety and calm. You can't live high octane all the time. But I absolutely feel that life is about adventure. If it's not about experience, what is it about? I want to have stories to tell. I want to have accepted change and grown as a person, and I think that's the only way you can really do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what a great lesson as well for your kids to have from the outset, you celebrating their failure, mm-hmm. and knowing that that's something that will give them the tools to be stronger adults who really know themselves and who aren't afraid to fail. I was reading an article the other day about women being particularly afraid to fail, that men tend to take, gross generalization, but that men tend to take failure in their stride, and that women are much more prone to just stopping. So in the example of your daughter learning how to walk, she doesn't just, and this is an Instagram meme that I see pop up every once in a while, little babies who are learning how to walk don't just sit down and go, I suck at this, and then stop. They get up every single time they fall. And yes, it's sometimes difficult to get up, whether you're trying to get up from a relationship breakdown or losing a job or a friendship fracturing or losing someone close to you, like you've just lost your mother. I lost my dad a couple of years ago. And it enriches and marks in equal measure, I think. And then you get up and you keep going. And not getting up to keep going is when you stop living. It's when when the wheels really come off is when you don't try to get up again. And what you said about being outside the comfort zone and not being able to live the high octane all the time, but that's when you're outside the comfort zone, that's when you're really living. I was suffering from panic attacks. After Carolina was born, my first was born, I had a few panic attacks, and those were really frightening. And then a few years ago, and I've mentioned this before for those of you who are listening, and you've heard me talk about this event, I had severe food poisoning and went into anaphylactic shock. And after that, because of different things doctors had said to me that I needed to be afraid of, and food was dangerous and all this other stuff, fear was my constant companion. And someone said to me one day, right after I had come out of a full-blown collapse on the floor panic attack, which is terrifying because you can't, you're in it and you can't rationalize yourself out of it. But he said to me, the very fact that you're still feeling, the very fact that you have these sensations means that this conviction that your mind has that you're dying is wrong. You wouldn't be feeling anything if you were dead or if it was over. You wouldn't. And it's true. We take very tiny things often and magnify them into these immense, handbrake moments in our lives, when actually I think they would be much less difficult to ride out if you just trusted a little more and were curious. If you let curiosity and trust guide you instead of fear, I think that's a much healthier environment in which to raise your kids, and is not the environment in which I have raised my kids up until the last few years, probably because I was so mired in this fear constantly that something bad would happen to them. And it's all to do with, upbringing, but also the postnatal depression and anxiety. But it is really a learning for myself and learning for the kids, teaching them that really didn't work out, did it? Well, what did we learn? Or how did that feel to you? And do you want to do something different? Do you want a different result? How would that look? How would you like that to turn out? You went to that event, that competition, and it was really uncomfortable because you didn't remember the things you were supposed to do. What was that like? Okay. Would you like to have that experience again? No. Oh, okay. Well, then what would you like to do again? It's all about learning and evolving, isn't it?
Absolutely. And yeah, as you say, that is life. And I think if you don't expose your children to that whilst they are in the bosom of your care before they fly the nest, then you haven't set them up for life. You haven't got them ready. You know, I mean, this might be a bit too harsh for some mums out there, but I just really, you know, I like the old sports days where there were winners and losers. I'm not saying you shouldn't be celebrated for taking part, but, you know, there'll be some people who are good at running and some people who are good at high jump and some people are good at maths and some people are good at drama. And you also need to accept the things that don't come so naturally to you, and sort of blindly just rewarding people regardless, I think is not then how life pans out. And, you know, I certainly feel like as a child, I probably would have benefited from failing or being aware of failure a little bit earlier, because when it happened to me in my 30s, it really, really rocked my identity. Whereas if I got used to dealing with that feeling of the world not marching to your tune earlier, I think I would have been better at adulting. You know, on a slightly more positive example, I got a really lovely note from a pal after I posted a video of my toddler learning to ski a couple of days ago, and she was just saying that she would love to get back to that point where you didn't lack the self-doubt before the self-doubt has crept in, and before that fear of failure really crept in. And she just said, you know, what you're doing on the ski slopes with your daughter, she's going to take that attitude, she's going to take that, and she's going to apply it to so many other things. And I feel that's part of what the expat experience is hopefully going to, I wish it, and I hope that it will give my children. It's just that ability to be in unfamiliar surroundings, but to have a recognizable way of processing the world and coping with it and responding to it. That is, do you know what, we're just going to have a go. And I would love that for them. And if I can play a part in nurturing that in them, if it's there, that's what I want to do. And I think it's the biggest gift I can give them, as well as being able to speak French.
Yes, languages are always good, but you're right that that attitude of let's have a go. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know how it's going to work out, but okay, let's do this. That sort of exhilaration of, you know, you get on the roller coaster and you know that some bits of the roller coaster are going to be really, really frightening and they'll turn your stomach and you might be sick at the end, but you're also going to get those incredible moments where, you know, after the drop, you get suddenly the pickup and, you're caught, you know, you're caught in the best possible way where you realize, actually, yeah, I could do that. And maybe you get to the end of the ride and think, oh, I'll not have that again, but I'm glad I did it at least once. You don't walk out of the amusement park thinking, I wish I'd done that. You know, you don't leave those things behind. And this is a really great segue into something that you did recently, which was not really within the comfort zone of mama to a sweet little baby of less than a year and a 2-year-old and a traveling husband and all of the things that we international families have as our reality. And I share your kind of squidginess around the expat word. I think it has a degree of there's something about, this is going to sound judgy and I don't mean it to, but excessive privilege that people who are here locally.
Oh my God, I was about to say the same thing. There's a sort of privilege attached to it and a sort of sense that you are somehow, better and more connected and more everything. And actually, a lot of the time, you're less everything.
You're so much less everything, And in the sense of being sort of cosseted and protected and wrapped in cotton wool.
Yeah, somehow escaping the boredom of real life, you know, but no, that follows you and it's magnified. And And then, you know, it sort of rolls into phrases like expat brats and how children are raised. And I struggle with it, but then I also accept that I am one. And I think I probably have a responsibility just to help maybe redefine that phrase in people's mind, at least some of the connotations around it, really tell the truth.
And I think as well, certainly here in Switzerland, things have shifted where when we came here 11 years ago, to be an expat meant that your rent was paid, they'd buy you a car, they'd pay for your school, you'd get new appliances, all of these things. And it was like winning the lottery. And that is not the case anymore for people who are certainly the much fewer degree of or number of people who are coming into Geneva used to be with big corporations. And now it's more back to being the NGOs, the UN, the World Health Organization, and others. And it is not a free ride, and it is not easy to be so far from everyone. And it is very natural, I think, easy, not in the sense of it being easeful, but in the sense of it being the lane of least resistance, to become completely mired in motherhood and bound up in all of the things that your children are living and trying to give them the best experience, and creating as much of a pseudo family around them as you can through friends. Or we used to have, you talked about skiing. We used to take our kids skiing to Léger, which is about 45 minutes from here. And they each had their own ski instructor because they started really young. And one of them had a really awful experience at a different resort. So we were bound and determined that they would have, that they would have somebody that they knew, that they loved, that they trusted. And they skied brilliantly. And these two women, we just went up there last week. And my little one who started, I think she was just 2 when she first strapped on skis with this woman whose name is Fanny. And with Fanny, we saw Fanny, and my little one is taller than her ski instructor now. And she's still one of her favorite people. They still have this connection point because she was like almost like an auntie or like a big sister that she could, she had as one of her people, one of the touchstones that she had. But it can be so easy in that context to start to, and I've heard myself repeat it so many times, and that's why I know it so well, that, my husband travels 80% of the time. It's a well-worn story. Travels 80% of the time. I'm on my own with the kids and the dog and the business and the house and yeah, we don't get away very much because we don't have any family around. And it's super easy to get into that, but it's so much more rewarding to find ways of doing something different. And that is how we met, because you did that. You took on a challenge that initially you had declined, which was to be part of the volunteer-run TEDx Lausanne experience. So tell us a little bit about that big step into something massive.
Yeah, well, I guess as with most opportunities that have come my way in life, I wasn't looking for it. And I was just, I was around a relatively new pals, and she was on the team, but I'd also just accepted a full-time job and sort of said, look, do you want to come in with me on this? Like, I'm sure the director would love you and the team would love you. You bring, certainly a different background and experience, and do you want to do it? And this was on a Friday, and my first reaction was, I can't do it. I don't have time. I barely have time to wash my hair. How the hell am I going to help to put on an enormous event, which, I think we've been overtaken now in size, but at the time it was the biggest TEDx event in Switzerland. 1,000 women turn up to this thing. I mean, what a huge responsibility of care you have to deliver something amazing. So I said no. And then I went off to the Women's Golf Championships in Evian. And I met up with a pal of mine that I used to work with in Hong Kong. And she's Chinese and absolutely brilliant, one of life's big characters. And she now runs a international comms business out of New York, and she flies all around the world, and her children are exactly the same age as mine. And she told me in no uncertain terms I was wasting my talents and to buck up and get on with it. And she's very direct, as you may be able to tell from that in that exchange. But do you know what? She was right, and she did me a massive favor. And I realized I just had to try and find the time to do it. And I went in a bit blindly thinking, it'll just be a few hours a week, I can find the time. And it quickly became all consuming because we were a very small team and we all cared deeply about what we were doing. There was a lot of passion there. And we had 3 months to pull this event off. I mean, it was just crazy. But it was amazing. And I knew I'd meet amazing women and actually men on the stage. But I guess what I was less ready for was the relationships I'd developed off the stage and the women that I'd meet off the stage. It was such a brilliant team, and we had guys on the team too. Hats off to them as well. And it was, I'm so glad I've done it. There were times where I was just like, oh my God, I'm crazy. Why have I taken this on? And of the actual event itself, my husband was away in India. He was away for 10 days, 5 days either side. Both the kids got bronchiolitis. And, as with all events, the proverbial hits the fan at the last minute and you are left just firefighting. but I'm so proud of the event that we put on. I'm so proud that it sold out. I'm so proud we still managed to find you a ticket. And yeah, I wrote a blog about this afterwards because there were huge lessons in it for me that I don't think were just personal for me. I hope that they strike a chord with others. But you know, the first lesson was that you can find the time. I talked about time earlier. It's a tricky mistress, but it's stretchy, it's bendier than you think, and you can do it. And what I did wasn't sustainable in the long term, but I could do it for 3 months. And yes, my children watch more TV than they should. And yes, I was too grateful for nursery. And yeah, they didn't get a big piece of me for those 3 months, but I honestly feel like I was doing something important for their future, and I was doing something for myself, which ultimately means doing something for them, because you have to have time away. You have to remember that you're a person, a human being, a woman, as well as their mother. And I so strongly believe that it certainly makes me a better mother to do that. And I'm not making a judgment here about working mums versus stay-at-home mums. I'm kind of both. And they have their pros and cons, but I just know personally I need time away to find perspective and to come back with a renewed energy for my children, because God knows they are exhausting, more exhausting than a TEDx event.
Yeah, yes, I echo that. My kids are 23 months apart, so probably around the same age difference as your girls. And yes, particularly when they were little and I was the one who was home with them, it was full on 24/7, especially when they get sick. One of them would be sick in the night, and then, you know, the other one not, or both of them sick in the night. It was a lot, but it certainly is. In your blog that we'll link to in the show notes, you mentioned that, you know, make time to go back to your family. In order to go back to your family, you need to go away. You need to have somewhere to come back from. And so if you're constantly in that context of the home, which some people choose and are completely nourished by, and that's amazing. That's not the case for me, and it doesn't sound like it's the case for you. And this is not, you know, if my girls are listening to this later on, this is not to say that I didn't adore being home. I did sometimes. And also sometimes I just wanted to be uninterrupted. And sometimes I wanted to not have, I was listening to a podcast with Mother Pucker and Papa Pucker, and she was talking about the sort of, one of her friends was on with her. There were 3 of them, and she was saying that when she was a teacher, she would constantly have like Miss Polly, Miss Polly, Miss Polly, Miss Polly, Miss Polly all day, and we have the mama, 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 like all day. So yeah, to be able to step away and to allow other parts of yourself to be fulfilled, because, you know, you're saying, remember, we're human beings. Remember, we're women. We're sensual beings. We're sexual beings. We're intellectual beings. We're career beings. We're all of these other things, to which is added on an extra, like another layer of the onion. It doesn't mean that the onion that was there before isn't still there. It is enhanced and enriched by motherhood, and depleted and exhausted as well.
Yeah. But
you're still, you know, you get to decide which parts of you bring forward into each new step of your life. Because as you say, wherever you are, wherever you go, there you are. Yeah. So who are you wanting to show up as in this new space?
I think, just leading on from that, another thing I really felt from TEDx is that the things that break you can also make you. And I felt totally broken after that event. I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten, I was exhausted. The kids were in bits, not from my doing, I want to add. You know, they just got ill, as kids do. They have an amazing sense of timing. But I felt like, I felt totally broken, but I also felt that I had found someone again. I found a part of me again that needed to be reawoken, that, you know, wanted to have a bigger space in my consciousness, wanted to play a bigger part in my life. And it was really important that I did that event, and I knew that it was going to take an awful lot to do it, but I'm so glad that I did.
I think everyone in that room is so glad that you and every one of the other volunteers, seen and unseen, on the night and in the lead up and afterwards, is beyond delighted that you all said yes, and then threw your hearts and souls and every second of time that you could at this event, because it truly was an extraordinary evening, and something I don't want to miss in the future. That's for sure.
I mean, the theme was showing up, and we had to show up in the biggest way. You know, if we didn't show up, it didn't happen. It sounds like a very obvious thing to say, but you know, I commit to a blog and I try to do one once a month. But do you know what? The world doesn't stop turning if I miss a month. Whereas you didn't have that option on an event with a deadline that was real, happening in a physical space with real people paying real money.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you kind of really felt the pressure of that, but you had to continue to show up, somehow find a way of doing it, even when it felt like there wasn't enough seconds in the day.
Tell us about the blog, because that's something else that you started as an exercise to remember yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I arrived in Switzerland, and, you know, as anyone who has arrived in a brand new place with no network and no friends knows, it can be a bit lonely to start with. I'd heard a lot talked about loneliness and motherhood, and I genuinely didn't feel it the first time around, because my husband was home a lot. He was on gardening leave, and then he worked from home. We had lots of family close by. My best friend had a baby 3 months after me, and she lived down the road. So I was kind of like, God, what's this insight around loneliness that all these mothers are talking about? Like, I don't get it. And I had my second child, so I had more company, and I felt it then. And so I realized I had to put myself out there. I had to put my head above the parapet, and I felt like I had things to say that might help others. But primarily, you know, being really honest, it was about my sanity. It was about having a little place that was sacrosanct, because, as you mentioned earlier, not even the bathroom is sacrosanct when you have children. You don't shower, you don't do anything without an audience. And I needed that space for me. So when I started it, again, my hubby was away, I think in India at that time as well, actually. No, maybe Thailand, Asia, somewhere. Anyway, far away, in a completely different world, kind of mentally, emotionally, everything. We were 2 weeks into living in Switzerland, and we'd just got a car. I knew no one, didn't know where to go, and I realized I just had to woman up and start living and start going places and start doing the stuff that had been on my mind for a long time. And this blog had been on my mind for a long time. I did an English degree. I love writing. It's therapeutic to me. And I needed to make sure my brain still worked, because it had been in this newborn fog for the best part of 2 months. And so I started the blog. It's called Life Lemonade. And it was for my sanity, and it was based on a fundamental belief that life is for squeezing whatever it throws at you, whether that's good or terrifying or neutral or boring, or life is about how you respond to it. And that's really the sort of motivation and the thought process behind it. And I felt like that was a human thing. It wasn't just a mummy thing. And that, you know, I could put something good out into the world that might be interesting to a handful of people, and that certainly would help me. So I remember, you know, doing the late night breastfeeds and trying to write a blog with a glass of wine, and sometimes a screaming baby, and sometimes a toddler that wouldn't stay in bed but also wouldn't go into a cot. But I did it. I learned how to build a WordPress site, which again would sound basic to anyone techie, but I just never done it before. It's not perfect. It's still not perfect. The logo falls off the top of the page, but do you know what? It doesn't matter, because actually all I'm interested in is having a shop window, and I just hope that my words and the experiences that I share there are enriching somehow to other people's lives, and they certainly are to mine. And do you know what? Even if it's just an online diary for my kids to read when they're older, that's enough for me. You know, it's not about the massive followings, but it is about, I guess, just putting myself out there before I was ready, and doing something that I am proud of, and that does help me through life. You know, I organize my thoughts through writing. Very often I sit down to write a blog and I don't really know what it's going to be about. I just take notes on my phone as life happens, and I find a way of threading it all together, and I make connections that I didn't know were there. So yeah, it's not just writing about life, it is life for me. It helps me make sense of it, and it's part of the adventure. So I love doing it, and yeah, I hope more people will discover it in time, but if they don't, that's okay.
Well, we will link to it in the show notes. And it's definitely a blog that I have enjoyed reading, both through your Instagram posts, which are lovely and heartfelt and telling and sometimes quite poignant. And I definitely recognize my younger self in the mothering spectrum anyway. I definitely recognize myself, in similar times, because I think I was around a similar age to you when I had the girls as well. And we're now creeping towards adolescence. And so it's a whole other raft of skills that need learning and interactions and ways of, you go from being the person who has the answers and the person who knows how to figure things out in the safe base to being the dinosaur and the person who, doesn't get it. And you're thinking, hang on, we're still like, I get all the things, it's okay. And yet, the generation, my father used to say, it's a bit grim, but I love the analogy. He said, as his parents passed away one after the other, and they were in their 80s, we're all on this treadmill, and as the people, sort of the little Lego figures, fall off the end, you just you get closer to the end. And I was thinking, as Carolina, comes in towards adolescence, the treadmill is moving, and then the lessons that you pick up and what you choose to do and how you choose to show up. Are you showing up as someone who is completely depleted and exhausted because you never take a step sideways and take care of yourself? Are you dancing your way to the end of the treadmill? What are you doing on that conveyor belt? How are you continuing? Because this is it's finite, this life, as you have seen very recently, and we all see if we're paying attention for 5 seconds. And so what do you want to do with this one precious life, as the poem asks, like how it was.
Spend your minutes.
As Mary Oliver said, what is it that you wish to do with this one, I'm misquoting her desperately, awfully, but one wild and precious life? What are you doing with it? And I love that you are not waiting until the kids are older, because I think a lot of people, mothers especially, but a lot of people think, right, well, I'll wait till the kids are older to start a podcast. I'll wait till the kids are older to write my blog. I'll wait till the kids are older and the things that you're sure you'll remember and the experiences that you're sure you'll come back to, you forget because other ones come and fill up the space. And
there's only so much room on the hard drive, right? So you need to get it out there while it's in your mind. And I think while you're feeling it as well, that's so important.
Yes.
But I get you. I was reminded when we had friends staying at the weekend, really good pals with kids who are moving into the teenage years, and they were sort of swooning over us, overdosing on Peppa Pig and there's cute little things that the kids out with that, if you're not careful, can become wallpaper in your life, or even things that you get annoyed about, and you realize these are the days and those are the moments you're going to miss. And that's not to say that there's not moments of joy with teenagers. I'm sure there is massively, but there's also the tough times. And as you say, you want to go back to being the one who could fix everything and the one who wasn't a minister without portfolio and is just the taxi driver, So get that. And as much as I'm trying to look to the future and be excited about it and make the most of it, that it also just means trying to live in the here and now and appreciate the mundane, the everyday, that one day you're going to miss because it won't be there.
Yes, that is so true and so alive for me right now, because I just had, we had a little pause in podcasting because it was technomageddon here with my phone. I mean, this public service announcement, don't let your phone get to 29,876 photos, because then it stops working. And your laptop, if also full of things like podcast recordings and other various treasured bits of digital real estate, also stops working. And so in this quite painful process of extricating my photos from the Apple loop, because if you have them in your phone and you upload them to the iCloud, you think, great, they're in there. Except if you take them off your phone, they also come off the iCloud. So it's getting them out of the iCloud and into other things. And I will spare you the details, but it was 10 days before we found a solution. And it took probably 12 days from start to finish to actually export all of the data and start to clean the phone. And I still haven't sorted the computer, but that will come. But in the doing of that, I was I was looking for a photo the other night, and I was looking back at these pictures of my kids and thinking how precious and how beautiful and how full of life and how exquisite and funny and silly they were. And also remembering with pangs of guilt and sadness how frustrated I used to get and how I wasn't seeing always. I often would, but I would also have moments of I just wanted out. Like I just wanted time to not either feel like I was failing them, because as a perfectionist, this can easily become the neural pathway that we dig for ourselves, which is, it's never, I'm always getting it wrong. I'm not doing it right. And I should be doing better, and I should have known. And, I should have taken her to the doctor earlier. I should have this. So you can should yourself out of all joy in life. But looking back at these pictures, I was thinking, God, they were so exquisite, and I knew that. And at the same time, the "can you just let me pee alone" kind of tended to take over more often than not, or that I would like to admit. And yet, as we come into this teenage time, it's funny that you said, there are definitely good times in the teenage years. And I was talking to my parenting coach, whose advice I would not be without. We're 7 years in, and I'm in it for the long haul with Leslie. She's also one of my earlier podcast guests.
You never stop being a parent. That's the thing.
You never stop learning, right?
100%. But
yeah.
The fallacy that, once they go to school, I'll go back to work because they won't need me as much then. No, they need you more because emotionally they're more complex. They finish at 3:30. There's practical things, there's emotional things. And, you never stop being a mother's daughter, and you never stop being a parent.
Yeah. And Leslie was saying she has a daughter who just turned 19 yesterday. And she was saying that for her, the teenage years, get such a bad rap. And for her, it was her favorite time, because if you're able to separate out from the things that they're doing, instead of being about me or against me, like if I'm being ignored, then it brings up all of, we all, if we're being ignored, have stories on some level of, I'm not important, you don't care, I don't matter, whatever the stories are that we have subconsciously. It isn't that. It's, look, she's unable to pay attention right now, or he's unable to hear me right now, or maybe I'm not being safe right now. And she was saying, when you're able to separate and to see them with generous eyes instead of critical eyes, which if you've been self-critical is really hard to do because that's your template, right? Like, to be self-critical to yourself. And that's what's gotten me this far, has goes the traditional thinking, even though it's not true. And then to learn to look at them with generous eyes, and then become the person who accompanies them as they're going on their journey, separate to them, yet alongside them in steps, so that as they need somebody to talk to check with whatever's going on social media, or they're trying to figure out this dynamic with a teacher, or they've got their first girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, that you're in step with them, and that it becomes a real watching of this person blossoming into adulthood. How exciting! I have goosebumps just saying that. Like, how exciting is that? And it's a stage that I'm determined to enjoy to the absolute fullest, instead of looking for what we expect to be the resistance and the conflict, which is what kind of media wants us to. Culture seems to push us towards feeling, is this feeling of
the dread.
Yeah. And I think
that's a lovely way of looking at it, and it gives me great hope. I'm not quite ready to shift my brain to that time, but I know it will be here before I know it. And it's lovely to hear from mothers and fathers who are further down the line. I also have a friend who just thinks teenagers are amazing, and it was her favorite part of motherhood as well. And I think, as with everything, you have to go in with an open mind.
Yeah. And be curious and ask. Leslie keeps saying to me, just ask the right questions. Ask, how was that for you? What do you think? How can I support you? What do you need right now? And if they don't know, then come with, well, would you like me to tell you what I would like if I was in that situation? And if they shut you down, then you stop talking. You just stop talking. And if they don't, then you engage in actual conversation instead of teaching. Because teaching doesn't,
what feels like judgment.
To them. Teaching doesn't really work for them. So as we draw the conversation to a close, as we're talking about moving on to next phases, tell me where you get your MamaFuel, because this is the whole raison d'être behind the podcast, is to provide some balm for other mothers' hearts and souls, and for everyone to know that we are all on this journey struggling and celebrating and experiencing and testing and being curious together. And yeah, none of us is alone, even though we feel like we are physically. So tell us where you get your Mama Fuel.
As I said earlier, I think one source for me is my writing and the blog. And if I only write that for me and, you know, my sisters, that's totally fine. I get massive comfort and strength and achievement and pride from doing that. Actually, I'm kind of, I'm not embarrassed to say that. Actually, it feels like something I am good at, and it feels like something that is good for me. And it really helps me to be a mother and to be a person. But I also massively feel, and you've kind of answered the question really in your question, you know, it is about the people you surround yourself with. And it's not just other mothers. I don't think Mama Fuel just comes from other mums or other women. Being able to share the experience of parenting with my husband is so important, you know, because you laugh about things and you get downtrodden about the same things. I always say, like, my adage is, you know, parenting is a team sport, and hats off to all those women and men who are doing it out there on their own. But if at all possible, I always want to be part of a team, because it's hard, and maybe you find your team not in your other half, not in your baby's father or in the mother, but in the group of people that you surround yourself with. And I think what really struck me when I lost my own mother was how many people in Switzerland I wanted to tell, and the inpouring of love from them in a meaningful way, not just in a surface level. Everyone feels sorry, everyone feels for you, but I got the most incredible, poignant, heartfelt messages from people I'd known for 5 minutes. In comparison to, you know, some of my lifelong friends, and they were absolutely there for me. But I think what I have been able to create since moving to Switzerland is a group of people that I genuinely love and that are different to me. And I think this is so important. You know, it's really easy to live in echo chambers of agreement, especially with the etiquette on social media often being such that, everyone just puts their arms around you and supports you, even if secretly they don't agree. And I worked with a challenging team on TEDx. We were really different. We didn't always see eye to eye. It was feisty at times, but I loved being in that environment. I loved being challenged. I loved being forced to see something through a completely different perspective. And I think that fuels me. I don't want people to just agree with me. Yes, I need the confidence of people who have got my back, but that doesn't mean that they agree with you unreservedly or love you unreservedly. And I think that is one of the rich things that you can find, particularly in life abroad and in expat life, is strength in difference and adventure and an experience in difference. And I would say that's been a massive part of what has got me through this last year, as well as all the pals and the family. I'm from a big family. I'm one of 4, as well as all of those people. I need people around me. I'm happy in my own company. I love the solitude of writing, but I need my community. I need my people. I think human connection is part of the human condition. It's essential to life.
Yeah, I think that is, my experience is very similar, and I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that is a beautiful place to wrap up our conversation with only one more question, which is, where can people find you online if they'd like to go and read some of your exquisite words that I really, as a fellow English lit grad who studied that just because I loved words, despite it making no sense on the job market at the time, I really appreciate, I do love a good word, and you put
thank
them
you.
together beautifully.
I agree with you. My degree did not set me up for real life, and I've definitely been learning the hard way ever since. But I love my degree, and I love words. I love writing. The importance of language is another thing I talk about around TEDx. So if you want to read that blog and others, you can find me at lifelemonade.com, and it's lemonade, LEMONAID. Hopefully you see what I did there. Yeah. Life_lemonade on Instagram, and Life Lemonade on Facebook as well. I play about on Twitter occasionally, but I'd be a bit embarrassed if you found me there, because it's the neglected child, I'm afraid. Something had to give. But please join my journey if it interests you in the slightest. And I'm always interested to make new connections and meet new people.
That would be fabulous. And thank you so much for taking the time away from your little one. I know that she's around the house. She's been very quiet and cooperative during this podcast recording.
Just had a little squawk, but I'm lucky to have my dad out here this week. So he's grabbed her. He was under strict instructions. But thank you for having me. It's been really great. I've loved it. It's been my first podcast. It was a little bit terrifying. I'm glad I've done it. And I'm really glad that we met the way we did. I love it when life does that.
Yes, I do too. And I really, really look forward to meeting you in person. So let's make that happen very soon. Thank you so much, Sal. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Anne. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it, and that you will recognize yourself in some of what Sally talks about and other things that came up in our conversation. Wanted to reiterate my invitation to those of you who might be interested in having a conversation and getting curious with me about what may be perceived on the outside. And by that, I don't mean what other people think and that you should care, but rather sometimes it's helpful to have someone else reflect back to you what they see, how they notice your beauty, how they sense and feel everything that is great and wonderful in you. So if you are one of the 5 people that I am looking for who would like a written portrait of yourself as a gift, then please get in touch with me at Anne, ANNE, at MAMEFUEL.me. That's Anne at MamaFuel.me. And we will set up a time to talk. Can't wait to hear from you and to hear what you thought of this episode. And to let me know, listen to what's coming next. That's it for this episode of MamaFuel the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. You can join that totally free by going to www.thecenteredmamaproject.com/Facebook, or just go to Facebook and type facebook.com/mamafuel.me, or just search mamafuel.me and you'll find us there. Make sure you say hi when you get in there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little bit of Mama Fuel, I would love for you to share this episode and to rate it and leave a review. That will help us get this episode into more mamas' ears, and for that, I will be eternally grateful. Every comment helps, and it is always such a delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.